Good morning. Good morning. The stuffy people have gone, right? The mortgage refinance people, they've left the table. All right, let's make it more exciting. I think one more panelist. Yes? On his way. Okay, brilliant. Thank you once again. So we have an exciting panel here for you today. And we finished the conversation with Simon's panel on we need a pipeline, right? That's a big challenge when it comes to really refinancing the green affordable housing from the MRCs. So the panel today will try to give insight into some of the challenges and potential solutions to actually catalyze green affordable housing supply. And to get us started, I think we will do with introductions. So my beautiful panel here will introduce themselves, the entity they represent, and which aspect of the supply value chain that they are involved in. Over to you.
Okay. So my name is Dennis Papaodeni Quansah. I work for the IFC as a green building lead based in Kenya. I also lead the EDGE program in Kenya, and basically I'm sure after yesterday, a lot of you may have heard about EDGE. You may have gone to our booth to see what we do. The whole idea is to encourage the development of green buildings in emerging economies. And we do this by bringing together all the different stakeholders, the developers, the financial institutions, and then government and professionals to look for the enabling environment to get green building to be a mainstream thing.
Okay, there it is. I'm Debbie Erb. I work for DFC. We're the United States Development Finance Corporation. My role is to head up a team that's focused on financing housing and real estate projects. Everything we do is on the debt side at the moment. We haven't done anything in the equity space yet, but hopefully in the next couple of years we'll be looking at equity opportunities. So right now what we do is we provide guarantees to banks for lending in the housing, affordable housing, green housing sector. We can also do guarantees of bonds, securitizations, and direct loans. Everything we do in the housing space must be EDGE certified nowadays, or in equivalent certification. Some countries have green building certifications that are similar, but EDGE is our new standard. We also have a TA program that we're getting ready to launch to support developers who are not familiar with EDGE and need some help with the certification process.
So good morning, thank you for the invite. I'm Noha Nael. I'm currently the Chief Sustainability Officer in Redcon Construction. Redcon is one of the biggest contracting companies in Egypt, and we've been operating in the country for more than 25, 30 years. What I'm currently doing is that, as everybody knows, sustainability have become the coming name of the era. So we're very much aware that this is what we need here in Egypt, and actually Redcon has been one of the pioneers since 2008 of creating green buildings. We have a very unique building in Egypt that is, everybody knows about it. It's currently the FAB office in Fifth Settlement, and this is when we started our efforts in sustainability and green construction back in 2008. So we have a very strong belief that this is where we should go, and this is how we want to operate. And of course, we'll be covering all the challenges that we might be facing in the future, because we come in the very middle of the supply chain. So we're kind of like hooked between the developers and the buyers. So I hope this session will be as useful as expected. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to welcome all the attendants. Welcome to Egypt. I hope you enjoy your stay, inshallah. I am very glad to participate in this global event as a representative of Faisal Islamic Bank of Egypt, and I would appreciate if you excuse me to continue my speech in Arabic. My name is Sabry El Bindari. I am the head investment sector in Faisal Islamic Bank. أحب أتكلم عن بنك فيصل الإسلامي نبذة سريعة كده. بنك فيصل هو أول بنك إسلامي مصري تم افتتاحه رسميا واستقبل عملائه في شهر 7 1979، بحيث يكون أول مصرف بيعمل وفقا لأحكام الشريعة الإسلامية، وبيكون نموذجا يحتذى به في كافة أنحاء العالم. وكان الأمير محمد الفيصل رحمة الله عليه هو كرئيس مجلس الإدارة، وحاليا بعد وفاته ابنه الأمير عمرو الفيصل هو رئيس مجلس إدارة البنك. رأس مال البنك وصل حاليا دلوقتي المرخص به إلى $1,000,000,000 والمدفوع 607 مليون دولار وفقا للتعليمات السنترال بانك اوف ايجيبت اللي هو البنك المركزي المصري، ان رؤوس اموال البنوك لا تقل عن 5 مليار جنيه مصري، واحنا بقينا متوافقين مع هذا. بالنسبه لحجم الاصول في البنك وصل الى 141 مليار جنيه في نهايه الربع المنتهي في 30/9 السابق. كنت عايز بس اوضح برضو حاجه، ان احنا عندنا 41 فرع، عندنا 548 مكنه ATM منتشره في جميع الانحاء. هتكلم بقى عن التمويل العقاري كده. اوكي، تحب تكمل؟ اتفضل قبل ما نخش على التمويل العقاري.
Good day and afternoon. Hope everyone's going great. So this is Dr. Sabry Bindari. He's one of the managers at the Faisal Islamic Bank. Faisal Islamic Bank is the first Egyptian Islamic bank that was opened its doors officially and welcomed their clients in the 5th of July 1979. And being the first bank that actually works according to the right Islamic sculpture, and it goes to a primary example for all Islamic countries around the world. The Highness Prince, Mr. Mohammed Faisal Al Saud, was the president of the board for the bank. And this idea have contributed with a lot of aspects of growing the internal economy for Egypt through the Faisal Islamic Bank as well, and through their contributions. According to the basic standards that they were going for the year of 1977, that the Egyptian Congress at that point, as an economic association, they wanted to contribute in affordable housing and in a green effect. And this is so far.
Excuse me. بالنسبة للتمويل العقاري، التمويل العقاري بالنسبة طبعا معروف ان هو بينشط 90 صناعة مرتبطة بيه، واحنا بالنسبة لنا كان عندنا هدف ان احنا نخش مع صندوق التمويل العقاري في تمويل الوحدات السكنية لمحدود الدخل. والحقيقة كنا وقعنا 2 بروتوكول مع الصندوق، في بروتوكول منهم ب400 مليون وواحد بمليار جنيه لتمويل متوسط الدخل. والحقيقة الدولة المصرية كانت بتسعى جاهدة إلى تمويل محدود الدخل بنسب عائد وصلت إلى 3% متناقصة، وكذلك المتوسط يعني. وإحنا الحقيقة عملنا محفظة رغم إن إحنا قابلتنا شوية تحديات في الأول خالص، لأن كان الرهن العقاري كان أساس، وإحنا كبنك لنا نظام أساسي اللي هو النظام الإسلامي، يعني ما ينفعش نعمل رهن عقاري على الوحدة اللي إحنا بناخدها تبقى ضمان. فتم تعديل قانون التمويل العقاري، وبقى في حاجة اسمها حق الامتياز بدل الرهن العقاري. والحمد لله قدرنا ان احنا نعمل محفظة بلغت الى $1,200 مليون في تمويل عقاري لمتوسطي ومحدودي الدخل. ده مختصر
يعني. So for the local contributions that the Faisal Islamic Bank would like to hash, they have also contributed in the local investment box for poor income developments in randomized area across Egypt to enhance the living standards of the basically economic state. And also, one of these contributions, they didn't face major challenges as all the challenges that they, basically all the contributions that they're going through financing the safety investment box, and also to finance local income for better economic development. So,
excellent.
Thanks a million.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think by the end of this session, we will all open an account with Faisal Bank, no? Done? Good job. Okay, so to get us started, from yesterday's discussions, we got the clarity that and consensus that the linkage between the twin crises of affordable housing and climate change, right? For us to really survive this. You know, in the past, with Kesia, we've been talking about affordable housing, bringing in private capital and making this change for the people. But we do this for the people in the absence of protecting the planet, then it's all null and void, right? So we need to approach this topic in the twin manner that it comes to us. So that consensus, that acknowledgement on the merit and urgency of linking the two subjects is there. Then on the other hand, you know, with our MRCs, with our development finance institutions, we understand there's a lot of money floating around looking for green investments. Now, from the Estate Intel Group with IFC Edge, we are, however, seeing a big disconnect in terms of the number of units or deals that are actually green and affordable housing. Now, this panel aims to shed light from their value chain perspective, right? From an IFC discussion we had yesterday at dinner, we learned of the cycle of blame. That, you know, I have this problem, but you're saying that if I do this, someone else is going to bear that benefit. But who's going to absorb the cost I'm going through? Hence this discussion. And to kick us off, I think we want to start with Noha, who sits from this panel at the beginning of the value chain, and really share with the group what are these pressing barriers from your perspective when we talk about green, affordable investment deals, right? Which challenges do you face and you think might be useful for people to understand? Hence, we're seeing this small pipeline.
So I think the main challenge comes with the awareness that we don't have the enough awareness. All of us, even the people working across the entire supply chain, up till the buyers. So even the developers, if I come as a builder and tell them, okay, we can use these kinds of materials, or we can use gray water systems or control our waste while working into the site, but this will come at a little bit of cost. Always the developer will come and ask me what will be the benefit to me when you do this, because they normally believe this comes at cost. But then let me tell you, with leading an example in something like this, it doesn't always comes at cost that is really significant cost, because when you kind of like apply all the green understandings or the elements of the green building into your site, there are simple things that you can start doing that will really elevate the importance of what you're doing. Like, for example, the waste management on site. We've been living into the operations of the construction, and we know quite well that we can make use or reuse the waste in other ways to even produce cement or other kinds of building materials. So there are ways where you can reuse, recycle, and we can create kind of an understanding, all of us, of and create this momentum of understanding what will be the benefits to all of us. We kind of like want to link the entire supply chain all together, and we sit down on the same table, agree on what will be the benefits for all of us, and I believe we will come to a common ground. But we have tried doing very simple things into the site, starting from the very early construction phases, and it worked. And we wanted even to gain the benefits of this. We have currently started our first green project as a developer. It's one of our companies, sister companies. It's called ROC. And this company, actually, its first project is a fully green, sustainable project. And we're kind of like experiencing and experimenting what we're saying on the ground. So it will be even our second pilot, because we've already piloted this before. So,
and just to connect still on that, would you say from a developer perspective, in terms of the supply chain, the materials, how strong is that industrial base? You want to build 100 units which are green, affordable housing. Do you feel that within your local ecosystem or within the national ecosystem, there's enough of an input supply chain to deliver that kind of units on the ground?
Of course, not yet. There is some sort of scarcity in materials. So you have to really, there are materials, there are available materials, but they are not as big as the demand. So we still have this gap between the supply and the demand. But I believe that we're trying to know these days, all the contractors, all the supply chain, that this is what we want to head. So I believe most of the providers for the different construction materials, they are starting to get the same awareness that we're starting to get about the importance of having green materials on board. Now we have so many companies, for instance, that produce green cement. We have so many companies that would come and provide you with an entire whole system of a grey water system on site, and afterwards with regards to the energy consumption or water consumption, etc. So there are certain things that are available. We're still working, I believe, on making this viable. So I think we'll get there some time, yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Noha. On to you, Debra. As a DFI, and from your vantage point, either interacting with the value chain actors or seeing the challenges, what would you say is a bottleneck?
For us, a couple of things. First of all, the education of developers and contractors in all of the different types of green building techniques and materials available, tools available, and just adding on the supply chain issue. One of the objections I hear from developers is everything has to be imported. Maybe there are, cement type options available locally, or other local materials like, compressed block, mud blocks, things like that. But for ceramics and maybe roofing materials, electrical systems, solar panels, all of that has to be imported, and it definitely adds cost. So I think we're looking at ways that we can support local manufacturing of those items. The other side of the education aspect is buyers. So the other objection I hear from developers is, my buyers don't care. I think that between local governments developing policies and showing people, promoting the aspect of buying a greenhouse and how it adds value for you is really important. And for us to support developers with grants or whatever to help them develop marketing materials to show a buyer clearly why a little more investment today will pay off for them in the long run.
Thank you so much, Debra. On to you, Dennis. You sit at the point of certification, and in most instances, to access this blended sort of competitive capital, those sources of capital require this confidence that the asset is certified green. What have you heard and have you seen as some of the challenges?
Yeah, so basically, one of the main issues is the misperception of the cost of going green. Here, if you should ask people how much it's going to cost them to go green, you'd get different answers. And you realize that most of these answers are not based on any research or any experience. They simply assume that going green is going to be expensive. And they're actually not wrong, because the basis of their assumption is that they have a picture of what a green building should look like. A green building should have solar panels. They should have a very sophisticated design. I do a lot of workshops, and usually one of the first questions I ask is, what is a green building? Or I show a picture and then ask them to determine which one is a green building. And you'll be very surprised. The ones with solar panels are usually what people choose as a green building. So when you have this sort of idea and this sort of mindset as what a green building is, definitely you'll be looking at a very expensive cost for them. But the work that the EDGE program has done has shown that there can be very simple buildings that are green. We certified a project in Ghana, which was supported by REAL, and it's very, very simple. It's a very basic, affordable housing project that was being sold for 50,000 cedis. 50,000 cedis is the equivalent of something around less than $10,000. Right, so that's one of the issues that we are seeing. And then the other thing is the being able to understand the cost-benefits ratio. People are not really able to do that calculation. Yes, we see building green is cheaper in the long run, but what is the analysis? How can a developer be able to, from the beginning of the project, do this analysis and then come out that, okay, it will take me 2 years or 3 years to recoup my investment, right? So that is very difficult to do. Well, the good news is, Edge is helping. The software that we've introduced is able to guide developers to really understand and then make these calculations so that right from the word go, they understand that this is what I need to do, this is the kind of measures that I can put in my projects, these are the ones that I can afford, and this is how long it's going to take me to recoup my investments. Yeah.
Great. And, in the instances and examples we've given, there's almost a presumption that for the units to be 100 built and to have this 1% incremental cost of going green, that value chain is connected. In most instances, and yesterday's panel discussion with the Zimbabwe and Zambia governments, you get to know that government is a significant value chain actor in this process. As much as you have the public, you have the private sector, and you have the off-takers. And one big bottleneck we see in our side of the continent, the eastern and southern, is the housing infrastructure, right? That's a sovereign obligation to provide that urban infrastructure for that house site. In going green, right, Oltetia spoke about let's get supply right before we even do green, right? To not counter him strongly is to say, right, we need to all go green, but that still remains an issue regardless of whether we're doing gray or green. Do you see such public rules as a significant issue, that everything else can be correct? You'll have the money, you can have the supply chain, but there are certain elements that sit within the mandate of the government that really sway that conversation. We can start with you as we go down.
Yes, so in our work we realized that incentives from government play a very big role. I think yesterday Risme mentioned, touched on it a bit, but incentives could be fiscal or non-fiscal. And most governments try to shy away from the fiscal ones because they feel it's going to cost them money. However, we've seen that the non-fiscal ones also do help. I'll give an example from Ghana where one of the cities came up with an incentive on expedited permitting. In Ghana, it takes a while for you to get your permit for buildings, and most developers will tell you that, getting the permit as quickly as possible really helped them in raising their financing and for them to also start work. So if this incentive that the city gave made it possible for people that wanted their project quickly, they were like, okay, if it's going green is how I'll get my permit as quickly as possible, then let me do that, right? So very simple incentives like these are helpful to encourage the built environment to go green, right? And apart from that, so there's also the difficult one of doing policies, helping to create policies. That's always difficult. We helped the government come up with a building regulation in Ghana. It took us about 4 or 5 years for it to be done, right? Usually that is very long, right? But if we are patient enough, because the policies help, once there's a law that says this is what should be done, then it becomes easier. Although implementation is another story altogether. You may have all the beautiful policies, but then how it's implemented. But at least it's a good start. So the legislation is also very important. But from our experience, we believe having the incentives is easier, it's quicker, and it helps stimulate the markets.
Debra?
Yeah, I definitely think that public policy makes a huge difference. A lot of times what happens with us is clients will come in and they say, we're building to local standards. And so why are you making us do something different or something beyond what the local codes require? And it's in a sense, it's like we're trying to compete or run against the grain of whatever the local policies are. So it would be tremendously helpful for us if there were national and local integrated policies that were focused on green building, adapting building standards to allow for that. I don't know whether it's reasonable to develop a whole local green building standard. It's much easier to work with an international standard that everyone's agreed to, like LEED, for example. But absolutely, it would be so helpful for us.
Excellent. Noha?
I think we're some sort of lucky a little bit, so because we've already started doing lots of things. So if we just walked since 2015, when we had this World Bank fund with $1 billion to support in housing for low-income families, not only that, but as well to consider in mind the energy consumption and work on decreasing the energy consumption by 30–40%, something around this. And I believe we've already delivered around 420,000 from them. So that's one of the things, or the direction. I believe it has become a governmental direction. Maybe we're not there yet, and we know we still need lots of regulations. The construction codes are almost still the same. It's this direction or initiative that is driving us towards the fact that we need to consider green buildings in all the future construction. But again, you're talking about the biggest, by far, industry that actually commits to more than 60% of the carbon emissions. So it's like moving an elephant, you know what I mean? This is how it is. So it's just that we will be there once, but we started. We have also the sovereign fund that basically is adding something, putting something around 140 billion EGP into housing and green housing as well. We have this other initiative from the Social Housing and Mortgage Fund that covers something around 25,000 units in the new cities, and they are all green. So I think this sounds to me, while I'm kind of like rephrasing them, like promising, but we still have a lot of work to do. And it basically shall start from policy regulators, creating awareness, and even teaching people the ROI with regards to this.
Excellent. So I think that sort of sums it up. There is a catalytic role that enabling agencies such as the state have in this topic, right? In getting this green affordable housing movement, there is a strong role of the state. So bringing it all together at a continental level. The numbers yesterday from Estate Intel, ETA, she told us there are 300 green buildings, right? Went down into a breakdown to see which were residential, which proportion of that residential is affordable housing. The number kept dwindling. From our database that Dennis has on IFC Edge, there are 156 within the continent that are EDGE certified, and that's green buildings. So it still goes into the same demarcation of residential hotels. In Kenya, which is one of the biggest ones, it's 56. Now, when we talk about making impact and really moving this movement, scale is important. This big money that's flowing up here will not do due diligence for, you know, a 10-unit pilot. The effort it takes to do that due diligence is almost that same cost of that development. So in the spirit of what we are doing here within these two sessions, right? We're here on the African Union for Housing Finance, right? African Union. When we run into problems that are beyond the capacity of one, we tend to come together, right? Agglomerate to find solutions, economies of scale. So this is a question that, as much as we're posing to the panel, I think we would also pose to the audience. Would, as an alternative way of really tackling this cross-border risk, climate change is a cross-border risk, right? We've all agreed that we are not the cause of what's happening to us. However, we are the most exposed. We are the least resilient to climate change. So it's smart of us to not complain about the fact that we didn't bring it, but be smart to actually protect ourselves. And housing, the number that we're told, 40% of GHG, most of the countries within this room have big mass housing programs in the plan. Kenya is talking about 250,000 units a year. Zambia is in the program as well. If we do not wish to lock in that carbon in the system, we want to build green. So would, as another horse in this race of building green, would a partnership of African countries coming together to agglomerate and build pipelines? So if we get the 50 from Kenya, we get the other 50 from another country, suddenly the number grows, suddenly interest of this big money comes down. Would that kind of strategy be useful in saying, how do we grow this green affordable housing program in Africa?
Yes, so basically I think that's the way to go. Because one, it's going to provide the necessary funding that developers will need. In our work, when you speak to developers, even those that acknowledge and understand that going green is very important, it's profitable, they still want funding. They want financing. They want blended finance, cheaper financing for them to do their projects, even though they understand why it's necessary to go green. So having this regional facility or approach would help us to really get that done. And then the other thing too is it's going to help us to learn from each other. We are going to be able to build the case studies. At IFC, we try to encourage case studies for all the projects that we certify. The main idea is to get people to understand how somebody went green, what measures the person took to go green, so that I can also learn from that. And then when I'm doing my project, I do the same thing. So having, being able to work together across the region, it's going to help that. It's going to make it easy, even for financial institutions that work regionally, to be able to provide the necessary products. Because when you speak to banks, one of the things they ask you is, where is the pipeline? Right now, if they can see that their pipeline is not just limited to one particular country, but on a regional basis, it becomes easy and much more encouraging for them to come up with whatever products that they need to come up with. Yeah.
Debra?
So, I think the key factor here is risk. I think we all, those of us DFIs, those of us in the grant-making community, we need to be prepared to take more risk. And I think that, in most cases, means leverage. We have to accept higher leverage. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. If we say to people, you're going to save money in the long run by doing, building green, then we should be willing to accept more risk up front. Essentially, we take the burden of that long run, that long-term gain by allowing higher leverage in the construction phase, as well as higher leverage for buyers. And the way we support that initially, I think, would be some kind of a guarantee facility. Leveraging local institutions, local financial institutions, and bringing, our group of DFIs and others together to support that. For us, it needs to be private sector driven, but I think that if an aspect of this facility is to promote the public sector policies to, as someone said in the last panel, standardize and create credibility within the housing infrastructure, housing ecosystems in Africa, that reduces the risk for us, and that gets us comfortable with taking more leverage. And we do that, then we enhance the economics for builders. That, I think, would be a really good way to develop the kind of incentives we need for larger scale green building.
Excellent. Noha?
I'll build on what Debra just said with regards to leveraging the risk, and I would say that's the power of the synergy. So this is where we need to be. So we need to really work on this power of synergy, the economies of scale, because like you just mentioned very anxiously about that, we're a African Union. So let's keep this momentum of that, the African Union, and then start it this way. And that would help leveraging the risks that companies and organizations like what Debra just mentioned, the financial institutions, they will find ways to mitigate the risks that they will face when it comes to this. So I think, indeed, yes, instead of just working on, like you just mentioned, 100 units here, 100 units there, let's agree on something on a global level, and then re-agree afterwards whether this needs to be cascaded differently when it comes into application in different countries, because I believe every country will have its own regulations that we need to respect, but at least there needs to be one regulatory framework for all of these countries to work together and come up with specific deliverable objective that will help all of us.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. I think that would have been the end of our panel discussions. We wanted to open it to the floor, if we still have time. Kesia? 5 minutes? Okay, excellent. Yeah, I can see. There's a mic coming.
Sorry, I get special permission from her because they say you talk too much and you are stealing other people's occasion. But I need to say this. We succeeded to have advanced H certification for $16,000 townhouse. And how we obtain it? Thanks to Dennis. In 1 month and a half, including software, education, physical presence of his team, training our technicians to understand all the methodology and improve, we obtain it. So what I'm saying to you, that Dennis there, he's a doer. And it's easy and not expensive. Dennis, sorry. I hope also Debra will do the same thing, because even though we are American, we have a green project. We have, 20 years I'm trying with OBIC, with DFC to go through. So Debra, learn from him. Thank you.
I think there was a question there at the Tanzania desk.
Hadija, I heard a rumor that there is actually a fund that may do this through the World Bank. Can you tell us a bit more about it, if it's not, if it's public information or can be public information? Thank you.
Absolutely. I think you start with some insider people over there. So the World Bank is at the very, very early stages of designing an Africa region green housing finance facility that speaks to the principles we've discussed here. Yes, please. You have your hand up? Okay. So very early days of designing how it can operate, and I like how, Noha, you completed it, that as much as there is a platform approach towards it, there is customized, tailored implementation within the countries. That's the idea. Looking at the value chain approach, straight from the supply chain of green ingredients all the way up to green mortgage offtake. So really work with the MRCs in providing that kind of apex solution at that level for offtake, but recognizing that sitting here pretty at this value chain end will not get us moving. So there's a lot of emphasis on catalyzing the supply, straight from the manufacturers and suppliers of green ingredients to the developers, to the governments when it comes to housing infrastructure, and some de-risking solutions for the financial institutions who are a bit fearful of new products such as green. So it's a really end-to-end kind of idea, and we are in discussions with some pilot countries.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I'm from Tanzania. I had a question for the lady from Redcon. And this is really much in tune with what Hadija was talking about in terms of actually just trying to figure out a way to scale projects across, by doing cross-border amalgamation. I wonder as a constructor, in terms of just making, try to bring in green financing for affordable housing, since you probably also do commercial type of projects. What about cross-fertilizing that separately? So you have a sort of a commercial outfit that you're trying to do for green, but then you combine that with affordable housing as a way to attract that larger pool of funding and sort of answer the question around profitability. Is that something that you guys as contractors have looked at? And on the other side as well, from a funding perspective, if you're looking at developers across the African continent, it's easy. I would think that it would be easier to, if you have a lot of projects that are probably commercially viable, but they're more like commercial, they're not affordable housing. The idea of linking the two, especially since you have urbanization trends in places where you need affordable housing, but a contractor can probably do that. But if they get access to funding for their commercial projects and you tag along the affordable housing element, you could actually probably answer both elements. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Privilege of the chair. My question is, I'm a little bit worried about tail wagging dog when it comes to defining green, right? So we have a green objective, and then that becomes the thing that we align to. And we heard yesterday from the professor about so many logical, very straightforward things that can be done, and that are within the framework of what we define as affordable housing. At the same time, I'm worried that the vast, vast majority of housing being built on the continent is being built by very small-scale suppliers, tiny, sometimes just individuals themselves. And even though that's, from an environmental perspective, that delivery effort must become green. Otherwise, we will not have a green affordable housing sector. So given the conditionalities of our indicators that we apply and the way in which funds like this work, how do you overcome? I feel there needs to be one more intermediation past you to help you get to the small people.
Thank you. My name is Chris Manyoa. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm a property developer. There's an observation I just want to make from this panel that I think a theme is kind of running through, that there is need for awareness of what is green, the elements of green, connecting that to what we heard yesterday from the lady architect who is a lecturer at the university, I think of Kenya. I want to pose a question to, is it Noha from Redcon, to say the projects that you are doing here in Egypt and also the pipeline, for purposes of clarity for this conference, what are the key elements that you would say constitute what is a green project, a green building? I think it will be helpful. Thank you.
Yes. I think you have two from Tanzania and this one.
So replying the gentleman out there, I think there are two channels for what you're asking. You were speaking about the affordable housing, and you were speaking about the commercial building and us as being a developer. So in terms of realizing the importance of having a green building, it's much easier for us when we worked as a developer, because we're the construction arm as well as the developer, to actually realize the investments that we are putting, because we have invested for this entire project on our own. So the thing is, we realize very well, we have a very sophisticated business plan that we made from the very beginning, and we realize that being a green or creating a green building comes at cost from the concept design, but then since we're going to be operating on this specific buildings in the facility management, for instance, this will pay off. And it's something around 5 to 6 years that the payoff will be very, very reasonably captured. So the thing is that, yes, if you realize the supply chain from the very beginning, if you have the concept design, and if you have all the elements in place, of course, when in the operation, when it comes to the operation cost or the running cost of the building, when it becomes up and running, you're going to realize and pay back for whatever investments, and you're going to find your ROI very clearly and obvious when you start the operations. So this, when it comes to the commercial buildings. For the affordable housing, that's an entire initiative for that we are part, that the entire Egypt is part of. The affordable housing, or a house for all, like we call it, is a nationwide initiative that is fully funded by the World Bank, and their aim is to build or to support in minimizing the carbon emissions of the buildings that we're building. So I'm not sure if I replied you or not, but I kind of like want to differentiate between both of them. Fine, we're good?
And this was related to the mixed-use development, right? Commercial and affordable. So from a World Bank perspective, how we engage with our governments and our clients is working within the environment, policy regulatory environment that the entity, the state has put in place. And in most instances, like Kenya, for example, where I work heavily, the affordable housing program has a policy definition behind it, not just from the price point, but also in terms of how governments can partner with the private sector. And the limitation on the sites is that as long as 70% is affordable housing, 30% of the development on the site can be commercial, right? In such an environment then, and that's for purposes of really beefing up the business case of that site. So in such an environment, we as a development partner will not come and negate such a national policy environment. It's to be more supportive. In instances where it's skewed, right, 70% commercial, 30% affordable, then you kind of have to, you know, weigh whether that really is for the low income or targeted group that this soft capital wants to go to. So it's really balancing, but still respecting what the national laws are. But the principle is clear. On Casey's point on small-scale developers, so I'm really torn about this. You know, we worked on the Naivasha project for close to 4 years, and the principle was that massive small, right? Getting small-scale developers and using that as that bottom-up development model. The noble initiative is challenging on one end because the business of the business still needs to be sound, where you want the small-scale developers to have certain credentials from a track record, but also some sort of risk in the game that can give comfort on participation if they are to do it by themselves. How we've tried to link the bridge is some sort of productive alliance partnership with established kind of a vehicle that focuses only on investment, and you separate the development where you de-risk through a phased approach so that as much as you can see the exposure in the small-scale developers participating, you limit the exposure. So not giving small-scale developers whose track record and possibly ability to do the business is limited, 1,000 kind of development site, right? You can go to 50. And then you grow by doing. Because I think affordable housing as a sector is actually more demanding from a skill than any other kind of residential building. The margins are super thin, so it requires even better expertise to make the business work. And that expertise is learned by doing. So from a small scale is really trying to de-risk through a phased approach, but using some sort of structure that monitors that growth. From 50, it can go to 75 according to certain outcomes and results that they're meeting. All right. And I think we are out of time. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for my panel. Nobody want to go to the airport with that.